we've got a number of people on here with us, so thanks so much for joining us tonight for Let's Talk Art, and I'm going to get into formal introductions here. For those of you who may need a Zoom refresher, which obviously I need, this is a webinar format, and although we approach these programs as conversations with back and forth, you can also use the chat to ask or answer questions, or you can raise your hand and we'll get to you as soon as we're able. You can adjust your screen view at the top right between gallery or speaker view. Gallery will show you everyone, speaker view will just show you who's speaking. So it is a really beautiful late summer day here in Western Maryland, and hopefully wherever you happen to be zooming in from as well. If I wasn't scared of unplugging my laptop, I would say sit outside while you listen to this, because it's just so lovely. I do have a couple of announcements. This is the final week of our Cumberland Valley Artists Exhibition, so please stop by the museum to see the show if you haven't. Sunday, August 25th is the final day. And tonight we have a sort of panel discussion on the creation of our other current exhibition, Art, Fashion, Symbol Statement, Tattooing in America 1960s to Today. The exhibition features the work of 18 contemporary tattoo artists and 1 photographer and remains on view through October 13th. Tonight is your chance to hear about how this came together, and I have the pleasure of introducing you all to my immensely talented and creative colleagues, Daniel Fulco, our Agnita M. Stine Schreiber curator, Kellie, Mele, our director of education, and Sarah Wolfe, our manager of exhibitions and collections. They have put together a presentation, and I'm going to let them do most of the talking, though I will be here watching the chat and monitoring things, so I may interrupt occasionally with comments or questions. So Daniel, Sarah, and Kellie, you can go ahead and start your screen share and take over.
Thanks.
Thank you. So tonight there we go. Tonight we're going to talk to you about how this really intriguing exhibition came together, and it's on view through October. So please come and see it if you're able to. So we'd like to start off by telling you kind of how this came about. And there was a number of factors that led to it. But I thought we'd, Kellie and Sarah, tell the story of how it really is with many shows, it comes about from conversations, right?
Yeah, we usually plan our exhibits out at least 1 to 2 years. And the past fall, last summer, actually, we were talking about what we would be doing this year and what we would like to do. We typically host several museum exhibits here, and we were talking about topics, and in our office area, Daniel and I were, and Kellie kind of pops her head out and says she has an idea for one, but she didn't think anybody would like it. So I told her to say it, and she said tattooing. And I thought it was a great idea. Daniel thought it was a great idea. So we ended up pitching it to the director. At first, we did look for traveling exhibitions, and there was one out of the Pop Museum in Seattle, Washington, but it was very much focused on how pop culture has made tattooing mainstream and how it helped it, as well as focusing on just West Coast artists. And so we wanted to do something a little differently, so we ended up doing an in-house exhibit.
And as we were thinking about, planning this show, we were also thinking about how, in addition, as we'll talk more, we would select artists and request that they submit things for the exhibition, which we'll get to. But we were also thinking about what works of art can we borrow, either from artists, but also from institutions. This is a series of photographs by photographer Mark Parrott, and we'll talk more about him later. He's Pittsburgh based, and he photographs many people, including people with tattoos. And we wanted to have a section of the exhibition that focused on the history of tattooing and its various forms, which includes a timeline. So we looked for things from the New York Historical Society, for example,
Mhm.
as well as the Library of Congress. And this is a slide that shows you some of the things that you can see in the exhibition.
And obviously, a lot of this, the history of tattooing isn't something that's contained within our permanent exhibition or our permanent collections per se. So what really drove what loans we got was when we started developing content. We knew that there were things that we would want to highlight, like what Daniel is showing from the Henry Ford, which is Thomas Edison's electric pen, which is the precursor to the tattoo machine. And we knew that we wanted to show the earliest encountered tattoos in North America, especially the Northeast. And so we looked to the New York Historical Society, who had these beautiful engravings of Iroquois chiefs that showed their tattoos.
And then we thought about, are there any other works of art and artists that would help to fill this out? And one of the most important in our discussions that came to mind is Don Ed Hardy, often considered the godfather of American tattooing, working in San Francisco, a fabulous tattoo artist who learned from many great masters, and also himself as a printmaker. And so these works, these really interesting prints, they'll come back up in our discussion later, are from the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, the DeYoung Museum. This comes from quite some distance, and it's great that we can include them in the exhibition. And as we were working on developing the show, what we needed to do was, in terms of those 18 artists that were mentioned there, we needed to pay site visits to their studios and or their shops. And this was
I'm
a
gonna
really
interrupt you just for a second, Daniel. It looks like the screen share turned off.
Oh, really? Let me try it again. Thanks, Kelly. Let me try that again.
It's just a message from Sarah. I don't know.
Can you see it now?
There you go. I thought you had turned it off deliberately, and then I realized you were referring to something that you thought people could see. So yeah, now you have your full slideshow showing. If you pull up an image, there we go. Excellent.
Thank you. I'm seeing something different over here. So there we go. So as I was saying, as a team, we visited these tattoo studios, and there's a listing there of a number of them that we went to. And I have some photographs here. This was really both fun and interesting, wasn't it, Kelly and Sarah, in terms of putting the project together?
It was. We got to know the artists. We got to hear about their inspirations quite a bit, and the difference between their different backgrounds and where they are located, how that influences their work. But yeah, it was, to see the studio spaces, how different they each were. The street shops versus the studios, where the way that they are able to in the street shops are a little grittier. You can walk in off the street and get some flash right off the wall, whereas a studio like we're seeing right here, it would be
More
making
pristine,
way more pristine,
less clutter.
and also looked at as more of almost more of like an art gallery. You would have to make an appointment way in advance. So, the way they go about things is way different. It's just a preference, and whether you're somebody who wants to do something spontaneous, or if you're somebody who wants to plan things and work with an artist and come up with a design together, totally depends on you as an individual and how the artist wants to do things as well. So we got to talk to those artists and hear a bit about their lives. And later you'll hear more about our interviews with those artists. But as you can see, Daniel's kind of going through the slides of the artists taking time to show us things they're proud of, tools they've made themselves, designs they're really proud of. And Sarah, go ahead. I know you were about to say, I feel like I cut you off, but go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that there's something that is so important about seeing the artists in their studios or their street shops and where they work and how their environment, they interact with it and how it kind of informs their art. Like the street shops, as Kelly was saying, most of those take walk-ins right off the road, and they'll do a tattoo from Flash. They don't often do custom work, whereas the studio, you know, it's much more of a collaborative custom type work. One of the gentlemen we did have, he has kind of a hybrid between the two. It's a street shop that does custom work also. So it was just very interesting to do that. And we visited everywhere. We ended up having artists from Hagerstown, Frederick, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, New York. This is one
So-
of the ones from Baltimore that we went to. There were 2 different studios that we ended up talking to that had completely different experiences in the tattoo world.
That's right. And we might describe when we went to Anthony Chestnut's, he kind of more of a street shop, right? Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah.
Definitely, but he also plans things out too, a little more in advance than a lot of street shops, especially when he's known as the doing
Cover-up king.
cover-ups. Cover-up king, yeah. So if somebody comes in with something they're not proud of, or something that
Well, he does
they
like
don't want to remember, go ahead, because I know you've
I
got
was
a
gonna
really
say
good
the
story.
program with he has a lot that he does with covering up gang tattoos for people who are starting into their next phase of life and leaving that sort of stuff behind, as well as medical scar cover ups.
So there's a lot of planning there, but then also he's kind of going with the flow. Whatever the customer needs, he tailors to. Um, that's kind of his philosophy, and they all have their own different philosophies. But I think that sounds to me like his passion is helping people work through things mentally, but then also physically with their tattoos. And that's kind of, using a reoccurring theme happened to be using tattoos as almost a form of therapy in different ways, and that was his way of doing it.
And another tattoo artist in Baltimore named Tony DeVille, this is his shop, DeVille Inc. And this was a very interesting visit.
Yeah, he's the combo of a street shop that does custom work. And in the show, we ended up choosing a wide variety of artists, everything from an artist apprentice level up to 30 years. And Tony was our second longest. So he had seen a number of changes in the field throughout those 26 years, 27 now that he's been in the industry.
And he is like a tattoo historian. I mean, he can tell you all the underground stories, and he pulled out tools and instruments that he made or collected during his journey as an artist.
Yeah.
So he was a wealth of knowledge when it came to figuring out where it all began, especially in the Baltimore area. He could go on. He could write a book of his stories of being a tattoo artist all by himself.
Yeah, we knew we'd be there at least an hour, maybe 2, when we would go up there to interview and talk with him, just because he has so much knowledge and he's so enthusiastic about it all. And he's gone from the early days when they literally had to make everything that they used. They made their own needles, their own ink, their own machines to do tattooing. Mainly because there was no company that provided those sorts of things for them, to today, where you can order all of that stuff from like eBay and get in catalogs and such. And so he was an invaluable source.
And his studio was so much fun. It was so eclectic. There is something on every inch of the wall. And he could tell you the story of every single item that he had displayed. It was kind of like a giant scrapbook of a studio space. So he was neat.
Exactly. And we even ended up borrowing some things, including equipment that he had, but also some visuals.
Yeah, what
in
he's showing.
addition to some.
What he's showing there is a tattoo power supply from the 1960s called a lunchbox because obviously, as he said, it looks like a lunchbox.
Now, a very different studio is that of Mike Adams, Masquerade Studio in Frederick, Maryland, which he cooperates with Aaron Harmon. And we'll show you some examples of their work later, but some of the ones in this slide are actually in the exhibition. And that was a really neat visit when we went there.
Yeah, it was the other end of the spectrum. His studio was so set up like an art gallery, really. I mean, it was, and that is kind of reflective of Mike Adams, who is an artist, a fine artist as well as a tattoo artist. And you can tell that that is his background. What he also does, beautiful landscape paintings as well, plein air landscape paintings. This is like his alter ego. He's a tattoo artist and a plein air artist as well.
Mm-hmm.
So after we did these various artist visits, we start to develop a checklist. And along with a checklist, we start to develop a cohesive a statement about the show that will turn into text. And what we wanted to accomplish, feel free to add, Kellie and Sarah, is that, often tattooing was considered a taboo through the mid 20th century. And gradually they become recognized as more deeply personal art forms that can be viewed in the same light as fine art. So what we're trying to do is showcase the work of tattoo artists, and some of them have never before exhibited in museums, and to show how their work is developed and how it connects to fine art in general, and then also works in our collection. So this is a new territory for the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts, and it's been a lot of fun learning about these artists' works in relation to the history of tattooing.
And that's one of the first things we start. The way we ended up finding artists were because we had really no reference at the moment with our own knowledge. We ended up looking at like who's like internet sites, Instagram, portfolios, who's who in tattooing, tattoo magazines. And we knew that there were a lot of different styles and we wanted to incorporate all of that. So once we found the artists, we also knew that we didn't want to presume that any visitor who came to the museum knew anything about tattooing. So we knew we wanted to have the history. And so once we collaborate, the three of us, and we've come up with our checklist and our outline of our script of what's going to be written in the gallery, then I take that and I turn that into a three-dimensional environment. And so one of the first things, you just do hand drawings of sort of ideas like what would be interesting, what most people haven't been in a tattoo studio, so it'd be interesting to be able to show what the interior of a street shop versus a studio is, looking at different things. So I'll start with just sketch drawings to get ideas across. And then once those ideas are kind of approved, then I will go to doing elevations and three-dimensional CADs of the gallery space to kind of show how you walk through. And what Daniel's showing is some of my 3D renderings for wall elevations, showing kind of how the information would go together. And this is the CAD. So you kind of have a walkthrough of what would the visitor's experience be. And it also helps us to lay out for where the objects will go, because I've been at the museum for a little over 2.5 years, and this is the largest show I've done here. There are 190 individual objects in this show. So that's a lot that we have packed into 3 galleries. So that's where we'll go. You'll see this wall elevation, and things do change through the design phase and even into the install phase, because sometimes once you get in the space with the objects, the curators and the director will look at, and I'll look at it, and it makes a little bit more sense to change some things around a little bit. Like this wall doesn't exactly 100% look like this because we moved the TV to another wall where it made more sense. And we wanted to showcase each artists. So each artist has their own section, own panel, and then their own work gets laid out.
So if you come to the show, you'll see each one of these larger panels, and then to the right, their work. These are some installation shots. So when you come into the museum, you'll turn left, and the photographs by Mark Parrott, which are very powerful images, they're on view in this corridor. And then you turn right, and you come into the Bayer Gallery, and in there you'll be able to see the John Simon English engravings that are on this wall, and then also a timeline about the history of tattooing, and some of the material borrowed from Library of Congress and these from the New York Historical Society. So this provides you with an overview of how tattooing developed, particularly in the early days, talking about from the 1700s through the early 1900s. And then you'll make your way next door into the Bowman Gallery, and in there we begin with the features, as Sarah was describing, of each individual artist and their work. And as you can see, you have those biographical panels that provide an overview of each artist's style. And this is really neat, Sarah, what you created here, the tattoo working environment.
Mm-hmm. And the thing with the design, you want to have a cohesive design where everything goes together and inspires each other. And so things like the actual colors in the gallery, the black and the red, were taken from actual pieces of work. So that showed up constantly in these kind of recurring motifs. And then because our shows are usually 16 weeks, I try to come up with techniques that have impact but aren't necessarily permanent. So we have our temporary walls, and then, as Daniel was showing, the kind of immersive environment that showed kind of the inside of a street shop. And if the visitor walks behind that, the opposite side of that banner shows Fleur Noir and the studio setup, as well as a little reading area where people can read books more about tattooing history and art form.
And even people that weren't huge tattoo fans walk into the show and they tell me how just beautiful the show is. It's just well put together, and the colors, like you said, it's just all inspiring when you walk in, is the feedback I hear from people when they go through it.
Oh, good. That's always nice to hear.
Yes, I do as well. And there is yet a third gallery, the Kirstein Gallery. And in here, there is more work by the various tattoo artists, some from Fleur Noir Studio, and then also others. True Hand, Robert Kriza, and then also we have Aaron Harmon and Mike Adams from Masquerade. So, and then we have some of the prints by Don Ed Hardy that are on this movable wall in the middle here.
I'm magically popping back. Can you guys talk a little bit about, when I've given a couple tours of this exhibition, thanks to all of your hard work, I have a pretty good understanding of the show. And one thing is, you go around and you hit, I think it's Diana is the first woman tattoo artist. And then the next room has several more women. So talk a little bit about gender and identity issues related to tattoo, maybe for folks.
And that is actually a really good question, because for pretty much American tattooing has been around since the 1700s, really picked up in the 1800s. And all of that time, even up into the 1990s and early 2000s, tattoo artists were predominantly men. There were a few notable outbreaks who ended up doing tattoo. A lot of the early women who were in tattooing, such as Hildebrandt and Maud Stevens, they were not only tattooed women in circus sideshows, they also tattooed themselves, but they weren't really, their husbands were also tattoo artists. So that's kind of how they got into it. And then in the mid to late 19th century, women weren't really tattooing, and it was a very hard field. And that's something that we heard from some of the women that were in it, was that just the hindrances that they run into getting apprenticeships, having good apprenticeships, being taught by somebody, breaking into the field, that there were a lot of barriers that had to be broken in order for them to do that.
And this is a photograph of Maud Stevens that's included in the exhibition. When I was initially doing the research, I was really intrigued by these artists. And Sarah, you and I talked about it too, with their doubling up as performers as well as making tattoos. So this was very interesting. And another important theme that comes out of the exhibition is, and it goes all the way back to the early days as well, is that it's about patronage, and in this case, the client, a close collaboration between the artist, the tattooer, and the person receiving the tattoo. And even more so today in terms of designs that people select, and how it goes from concept to final work is a really significant part of it.
That's one of my favorite themes in the exhibition, I think, because we're able to then relate the tattoo exhibition with the great masters in our collection. Because, and I think I'm stealing this from Sarah Hall. I heard her say this to someone, but it's such a good point. The original people used to pay for art to have either biblical scenes done from the Bible for churches, or they would pay for people to do portraits of their family, the really wealthy people. So you had to have money to be a patronage of the arts a long time ago. And we have great examples of that in our Masters gallery. But then when you go to the tattoo exhibition, many people, and it's opened it up to normal people that can afford to have tattoos done. I mean, they're still expensive, but so many people now have tattoos and can be patrons of the arts in that way, and then also make it really personal and have it on their bodies forever.
So I'll just add into that,
Yeah.
that I have noticed when I'm in the galleries, people are a little different. They understand that this is accessible. So it's a little bit like when you deal, and we have the word fashion in the exhibition title, but when we had the Claire McCardle installation, or when you have a fashion installation and people say, oh, I could wear that tomorrow, or that's so beautiful, and they respond to the tattoos that way. There is an element to them that's about product, and people are interacting with it in a sense, as consumers, in a way that they don't interact with old masters, right? Because most of us are not consumers of old master paintings. A very tiny percentage of our museum visitors might have the capacity to do that. So it is really, and I think in some ways that's a more intimate connection, because it has to do with your own life, right?
Yeah,
It
and they're
becomes
deeply
part of you.
personal, and especially since about 2010, the tech, just like in all wakes of our society, is rapidly changing. It's becoming smaller, more compact, more accessible for people. Like, they used to have the coils, which were very loud, very big. They caused a bit of more trauma to the skin, so you could only do lines so thin, usually very thick. And now they have small little machines that are the size of a pen almost, that have they're wireless, which allows the artist to work in different angles than they ever were before. They're lighter, and they were able to, yes, the ones that Daniel is showing on the right, those are the coil machines. And that's just one component that would have then been on a longer needle. They're heavy, they're very loud. Like I said, they cause trauma, but now they've gone to the smaller rotaries, smaller needles. They can do finer detail, and we're finding that there's more of an influx into the tattoo industry because this technology is allowing the artists to bring visions that have only ever been in their mind to the skin, and the tech is allowing them to do that. So they're getting a lot more creative and they're doing a lot more custom work. And now the client is able to really work with them to create something that is specific and special to them, but is completely unique. And that's something that, you know, a decade and a half ago would not have necessarily been possible.
And we can see some of that fine line work with an artist like Constanza Ballerinas, for example, or Adelina Mai.
Adelina May,
Yeah.
her stuff is very fine lined. And very small. She
Microrealism, right?
does microrealism, yeah, where it's almost like photographic.
I love that in our collection, I saw that Daniel and Sarah put out some botanical watercolors up against and pen and ink up against her work. And it's just such a great response to it because, you know, a long time ago, scientists would be artists as well, and they would create illustrations to go into scientific books. And she's pulled, I don't know if she did she say, I'm not sure if she actually
Yeah, both
was
she and
inspired by that
Casey,
or if
they do actually look at scientific drawings and do
botanical
research and
prints.
kind of get
Yeah.
inspiration for their works.
And it's wonderful that we could have our part of our permanent collection out with their work alongside of it. And it almost looks like just, I mean, hers looks obviously much newer, but they could have been in the same book together.
Yeah, I'm struck by the level of detail achieved by many of the artists. You had mentioned, let me see if I've got Casey here. Here's her work.
There's another one.
Casey Shu with Fleur Noir. She also has really.
And she's one of those, this isn't actually her original career field. She was a biologist before, and then COVID hit, and she loved to do art. And so it kind of translated into that. But most of her influence, she still draws from that interest in biology and life.
And when we were picking the objects for the exhibition, Sarah Wolfe mentioned to me that it would be nice to include the Prideaux John Selby of the Night Heron. And you can see the connection with Casey's drawing there on the left. It makes a really nice visual parallel. And the artists really have a lot of different styles. Gabby Mora, for example, she is interested in surrealism and magic realism in her work. She also has done tattoos of very famous images, such as Gustav Klimt's work here, The Kiss, which is iconic.
As well as on the other side, the pic by Hiroshio, who was a famous Japanese tattoo artist. He actually tattooed the King of England in 1860, and he was so impressed with the tattoo, he sent both of his sons back to Japan to get tattoos from him.
Yeah, this was a really neat one. Here it is. So that's her drawing, and then
Interpretation of his work.
here's the print. Now, an artist with quite a different style was, let me go back, Alan Shepard. He's influenced by Chicano art and also the traditional American tattoos, sort of blending them or melding those together to create these really beautiful works. And the artist from Fleur Noir, one of the neat things when I originally visited the studio that caught my eye were this series of photographs that the artists had done in connection with different photographers. So in this case, Alan Shepard with Joaquin Motor. Actually, Alan Shepard and Joaquin collaborating with Eric Urgiles or Eric Hercules.
Yeah, and Alan actually did the purple on the back, and he has a specific technique that he uses for his tattoos, which is kind of like dot stippling. And so he did that part, and Joaquin, he does the other type. So he put in the white flames.
Hmm.
And you can see that on this drawing up here, how some of these tattoos appear on the photograph down below here. That's a really neat connection to see that. And these mixed media photos were also included. They were exhibited in, I believe, a gallery in New York. But they really caught our eye. They're very arresting images. We also have Semi Kuklak, whose work is very colorful.
She does a lot of microrealism also.
Yes.
To have that painting translated to skin is incredible.
And that's
It
a
looks
big
like a
thing.
watercolor wash.
Yeah, and that's a big one. Watercolor tattoos, which are very vibrant like that. But the one thing we also heard was how tech, not just the machines, but the whole process of how you do a tattoo is changing. And it used to be you would draw it out on paper, get what they wanted, put it onto tracing paper, copy that, and then print it through a special printer that could put it onto a type of transferable paper. So it's kind of like a copy of a copy of a copy. And if anybody's done that before, you know, you lose some sharpness in that each time you do it. Well, now they've got the iPad and they're just drawing directly onto that and sending it straight to print. And so they're able to get very crisp lines and a lot of detail into their tattooing that wasn't previously possible.
And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Sammy kind of a jack of all trades when it came to the arts? I think she went to Pratt and she
Yeah.
dabbled in like lots of different fabric. There you go. Yep.
Yes.
Jewelry
Metalworking,
making.
jewelry. Yeah.
That's right. And
Um,
many of the artists, as we discovered, they've gone to art school and or pursued other careers. I think we were talking the other day, Sarah. Was it that two artists were nurses? Is that right?
Yeah, Constanza and Adelina. Both are.
That's
Constanza was training to be a nurse and didn't exactly like it, so she ended up leaving it, but Adelina was a fully trained nurse. And then they went into tattooing. But they also started pursuing more art backgrounds and getting art, you know, they will tell you we're constantly learning, we're constantly improving our craft. We'll go to art classes, we'll take photography classes, we'll look at work in different mediums just to see how the art looks on that and works on it. So they just have a wide variety of different backgrounds.
And Constanza is very influenced by surrealism, and particularly Salvador Dali. This was a print about which we got excited, and we ended up including it in the show. Is
The tan piece in the middle, that's actually a practice flesh that she did. So is the Salvador Dali that you see there. And that's one of the ways, because we get questions, and it was one of the first questions I think Kellie and I asked them at Fleur Noir is like, how do you train? Because you just don't let somebody loose onto another human to start permanently marking them. And they said, well, they kind of do. They're apprentice, and it's a long process, and it's at least a year before they're allowed to put any sort of needle into anybody to ink. And it's usually themselves. They'll tattoo their thighs first, or they will end up tattooing a cantaloupe, or was how they used to do it, or pig skin. Now they have synthetic skins that they can do, and they have not just flat ones like she's showing here. They have actual body parts, and they're made of the same type of materials that CPR mannequins are made from. And the great thing about the ones that are actually body parts is that they can see how tattoos work three-dimensionally, because unlike traditional two-dimensional art on canvas or paint, a body moves, it ages. So they have to understand these things, they were telling us, in order to make sure that the tattoo looks the best that it can from any angle, so that they don't necessarily move and have it go into a weird look and that distorts the work.
hers is micro realism as it gets too. It's got
yes.
that twist of surrealism with micro realism.
That's right. And this kind of fragmented imagery as well made us think of our one of our Dali prints in the collection, the anti-umbrella with liquid atomizers. Salvador Dali, you basically creating a collage type print, and it creates a nice dialogue with her work. So this was really nice to be able to feature that. And like before, we were showing you with Alan Shepard and Joaquin Latour, and then Eric Hercules. Constanza also collaborated with photographer Oliver Corbett to create this beautiful mixed media photograph in which you see tattoo design elements juxtaposed with the photographs of these figures. It's a beautiful work. This was one of them that was hanging in Fleur Noir during our visit. Particularly captivating.
I see a hand up.
I was just typing a chat to Elizabeth to see if she still had a question. Elizabeth, we can enable you to talk if you would like. Let me go here. Now, of course, I'm on the wrong screen. Okay, I pressed the allow to talk button. So if you want to ask a question, you can, Elizabeth.
I have several. Lately, I heard that you have to be very careful what kind of ink is being used. So how do I know if I go and want to be tattooed that this person is really using the ink that does not cause any problems? So I don't remember what they said you should use, but how?
Well, the inks have improved greatly over the last couple of years, not just in the quality of it for being longevity for tattoos, but just the variation of colors and such. And they make different companies make different ones. I know Anthony Chestnut, he said he had to find a specific one because he ran into problems with the colors that pretty much everybody else was using because they did not necessarily work really well on skin of people of color. It would cause rashes and breakouts and things of that nature. So he did a lot of work to find a company that had one that would work really well on that type of a skin.
The other
And I
thing
would,
But any actual shop you go to, they will have inks that are good to be able to be used.
and you could ask up front, and because they each have their own favorites of brands and things like that, and you could ask what they use. And we find that people are really, I mean, I can't speak for all of the artists out there, but they will show you and tell you what they have because it is, I mean, it's what they do for a living. So, you know, I think if you go and ask and look at it for yourself, people are very open to what they're going to use on your skin.
Yeah, because they want you to be comfortable in
They
sitting
should.
in the chair.
And if they
and
don't,
what you're
then that's a
having.
red flag.
Yeah.
The other question I have, what happens if then somebody develops skin cancer? I have seen young people and I admire them for having it, their whole arms and some of the body like you're showing tattooed. And lately I see quite a few women, which is absolutely fascinating to me. I'm 84 years young, and as a child, I saw mostly sailors in Germany being tattooed. But never mind. So what if somebody does develop skin cancer? What can that be repaired afterwards? The drawing, if they have to.
Yeah,
covering
up is very popular. There are a lot that are very talented in that. Anthony Chestnut, as we were talking about, the king of cover-ups, he can cover up on scar tissue. And he and Tony DeVille both have programs where they do what are classified as medical tattoos, which are things like he had one client who had a double mastectomy and it went wrong and it got infected. And so they had to do a skin graft over her breasts and he gave her 3D nipples in order to cover that up. He had another woman who had terrible scars from a childhood incident when her mother put her and her brother in the oven, and she had terrible scars, and he was able
Oh
to
my.
completely cover that up, and she couldn't see any of the scar. All she could see is the tattoo.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm sure that it lifted, I hope it lifted her spirit.
He did. He
Yeah.
said, she started crying when she saw it because she only saw the tattoo. She didn't see
Yeah.
anything else.
Right.
I'll
I'm a
say,
nurse. I'm asking some medical questions. The other one is, the layer, the skin has 3 layers.
Mhm.
And so the dermis, whatever, you know it.
Yep.
And how deep does the needle actually go? How,
It first or second layers.
okay.
I mean, the smaller needles, they do less trauma now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't think it does.
The dermis and the epidermis then.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely goes through dermis. That's not
Mhm.
something we actually included in the show, and that's an
okay,
interesting
and
question.
I'll jump
Yeah,
in.
that's right.
I'm here. I Googled, it's Sarah, other Sarah, and it
Yeah.
says, that the depth of the needle is usually 1 to 2 millimeters, and that's going through about 5 layers of the epidermis.
Oh,
So
5 layers.
it's
Oh,
hitting
good.
the
Yeah.
top layer of the dermis. So it's going
Yes.
between the dermis and the epidermis.
Okay.
Um,
You said earlier that you showed these wonderful pictures from the 17th century in the
Mhm.
beginning. Uh, was it was there tattooing prior to that? I mean, I would think the
Yes.
Greeks, the Romans would have done
And
that.
that's an interesting thing. Everybody, there seems to be a consensus that people tend to think, especially in our country, that tattooing is relatively new. It's something that's only been going on a couple hundred years. And actually, tattooing, like a lot of things, it goes through waves of popularity, it being taboo, being very popular, going back to being taboo. And it actually dates back more than 5,000 years. It
Yeah.
dates back to the BC era. And
Yeah.
some of the first that they saw are the Iceman Ozzy that they ended up finding. He had 61 tattoos on his body, which they think were sort of medicinal type tattoos for osteoarthritis. And they have mummies who have been discovered in ancient Egypt that have tattoos on them. The Greeks had them, the Romans. They
Yeah.
had them, but they didn't. It went through popularity, being popular with the society, to then not being popular and used as penal type tattooing on criminals, runaway
yeah.
slaves, enslaved people, and gladiators, things like that. And then Emperor Constantine ended up banning tattooing, especially the
Oh.
criminal tattooing. And so in the Western society, it kind of fell out of everybody's mindset until Captain Cook in 1769 did his voyage to the Pacific and ran into islanders who had tattooing and brought that
Yeah.
here.
That's right.
We have
Okay.
another
Thank you. Those were my
question.
questions. Fascinating program.
We have another question in the chat from Ralph, who's asking about the interference of tattoos with MRIs. If one of you knows more about
No,
this, I did Google
There
it.
isn't any. There-
Apparently, some inks could have metal in them.
Not enough.
Not anymore, right?
Yeah, I have tattoos on me from the 90s all the way up to today, and I've had MRIs and I've never had them ask anything.
Maybe it it depends on the age of your tattoo, I guess, would be the answer to that. The other thing I wanted to add when you were talking about scars is that in your interviews with Anthony Chestnut, it was actually really moving the extent to which he sees himself as helping people essentially with both their physical and mental health, that he is really motivated to do good through his work and often negotiates his fee with people or works something out, because when people have a traumatic issue that they think a tattoo can fix, he really wants to help them. It's very moving, actually.
And I have to say, when I give tours, I'm really, really grateful that his part is towards the end of where I go when I give a tour, because it's such a nice note to leave people on, because um, it is so emotional when you talk about Anthony Chestnut and his motivation. He even, I mean, he gives people huge discounts if he knows they can't afford it and it's going to
Free.
be deeply meaningful for them. And just because he knows how important it is for their spirit. It's just a really nice way to leave people.
And he has a wide variety of working styles, imagery derived from popular culture, also social political imagery, such as this one he did for a client about Malcolm X, which I found really interesting when I was writing about it, doing the research. I found out that it came from a series of posters of Malcolm X with his famous saying, to achieve equal rights by any means necessary, in connection with the Free South Africa movement. And then also this poster here, where the civil rights leader was holding this machine gun. So it was very interesting to see where he was deriving his imagery and inspiration.
And it's also on the other end of it, kind of juxtaposed to this, he's also a comedian with a huge Instagram following. So I do encourage people to look him up as well.
Yes, exactly, Kelly, with his sort of visual pun here about the Wu-Tang clan, their music. It was really neat when I had a chance to ask him about this and then looked for it deeper in terms of incorporating um, their logo in here, but and then with a play upon words that they had mentioned. Um, I believe it was at an award ceremony. So there's all these elements of popular culture that come into play with Anthony's work. This one not being a tattoo, but one of his paintings.
And actually, he did use the bumblebee part in one of his tattoos that's in the show.
An artist who's quite different, but also works with the traditional imagery. Now, got to this slide. This was another major studio, True Hand Society, and Mike Ski. Very interesting and talented artist there he is there with a client. And this kind of the graphic appeal of prints and graphic art in the 1970s and 80s. You can see with this Richard Lindner print, he was an artist born in Germany, worked in America, particularly New York. You can see the visual parallels with some of Mike Ski's designs. So had a lot of fun doing this. But his business partner, Robert Priza, he works in entirely different stuff. One often tied to Art Nouveau, and that presented some interesting artistic conversations, for example, with our Art Nouveau Bing vase by Edward Colonna and this cicada bug design and tattoo that Robert created for a client. And then his inspiration from Alphonse Mucha, the great Art Nouveau artist from what's today the Czech Republic. They're just beautiful works, and he's made such careful, meticulous study of Mucha's drawings and pattern books in these designs that you see here.
Yeah, what's great about the exhibition is that it does bring together so many styles, from the old school American tradition to the micro-realism to Art Nouveau to more urban designs and the Wu-Tang, and then even to some of the great Dutch prints that like Durer that Mike Adams used, and even some of the Renaissance paintings that Aaron Harmon was inspired by, and Dali. We have Dali, so we have so many different styles involved from all over, all different times, all different movements. And it's wonderful just to walk through and see them all together, all at the same time, and all from different parts of different cities, and to see how different cities have inspired the artists themselves.
Yes, and for an artist like Mike Adams, he's enjoyed visiting our museum before we got to know him. as we plan the exhibition, and as Kellie was mentioning before, he does works outdoors on plein air. These beautiful tonalist or perhaps late Hudson River paintings that convey beautiful moods in nature. And we paired that in the gallery with our Alexander Wyant. If you come and see the show, I mean, these artists directly inspire Mike in his landscape painting.
I've been talking about Mike. He just did 6 book covers for Macmillan, and maybe doing some more for a reissue of a series of, I think they're sort of neo-noir novels by Roberto Bologna. I know my husband has read some of them.
Very exciting.
Fun for him. Yeah, really
Mhm.
wonderful to see that.
And as we were mentioning, Aaron Harmon, he's interested in Renaissance art, serves as a great inspiration to him. If you come to the show, you'll see his big collage of different designs called the Artist Desk. It's really a lot of fun. This was just so much interesting to look at it. There's one design here of 2 men dueling with all these fanciful images. And you can see how he's borrowed from Renaissance art here, particularly that plaza, the architecture, from artists like Perugino with the delivery of the keys there. So it was really just very interesting doing this. And he also paints portraits, in this case, a self-portrait in which he takes influence from artists like Petrus Christus, the Dutch master, and the portrait of a Carthusian monk. And in addition to the work itself, we've also had some really outstanding programs in conjunction. And these are some photos.
We had a tattoo expo, but it wasn't just a tattoo expo. We had multiple punk bands. We teamed up with Savage Mountain Punk, who brought in a few different punk bands, and you can see people dancing and just having a good time. And we had Kushwa Brewery, of course, and multiple different vendors, including a fashion designer, a local fashion designer who gave a workshop on how to dress for your tattoo. And we had live tattoos happening from local tattoo artists. So we really tried to bring more local in at that point as well, and get the community to come in to see the exhibition. And it was even kind of family oriented as well. We had all ages coming through. They got to see live tattoos, but then also a scholarly tour of the exhibition, and some fun music out in the garden. So it was a wonderful day, and we continue to have people come through. And here over to the right, you see our mannequin and an ink spot station. So people could go and test out what it feels like to give a tattoo. That's not an actual needle, that's pen there. But with that flesh, that fake flesh that Sarah Wolfe was talking about earlier, that tattoo artists practice on to get ready to give actual tattoos. And then, of course, you could give a tattoo to our mannequin. And then if you slide over, Daniel, to the left, we had a wonderful garden night. And we invited a henna artist to give tattoos that are not permanent. So you could walk away for a couple of weeks with a beautiful henna design, which is popular in many Eastern cultures. I believe she was kind of featuring Moroccan designs that day. And then all the way to the left, you can see a couple of, this was intended originally for students to and children to give tattoos, but as you can see, all ages really got excited about trying out what it feels like to give a real tattoo. And so we see a couple of men who have tattoos themselves getting a chance to see what it feels like to be on the other end of it. So that's kind of, the exhibition really gives a whole new perspective to tattoos, and gives you the historical aspects as well as bringing in our permanent collection and showing the history of tattoos from where it began in the really great timeline that Sarah had created in the introductory gallery, all the way to the most contemporary. I think our youngest artist is in their early 20s, and what they're doing now with the technology and how far it's advanced. So I do hope people come in and get a full holistic experience with this exhibition and get a brand new perspective on tattooing in America. Oh, you're on mute.
Good.
Okay, it has been an hour and that sounded very like a nice wrap up, but if you have any more slides you haven't shown, Daniel, that you think we should get through quickly, that's fine. And we can also open it up if folks have any other questions they want to leave in the chat, or raise your hand and we can give you control of the mic if you want to ask us something. It's been really fun. I love being able to just sit back and let these folks do the work. And I've been impressed by the various questions that we've had as well.
I think we've about covered it. As always, I have a preview slide for what's next while we're waiting.
Great.
Floating Beauty, Women in the Art of Ukiyo-e, Japanese prints and other Japanese art objects are going to be on display beginning September 21.
And we're planning to talk about those at the next Let's Talk Art in October, correct?
That's right.
And I have another reminder, and Kelly may want to jump in here, but we have our final garden night of the season on Friday, September 13th from 5 to 8. These are really magical evenings. The museum is open until 8, and we have access to all of our exhibitions, but we have live music in our Kayla Rose Garden. We encourage folks to bring their own picnics, chairs, or blankets. There's wine available for sale from Stonehouse Urban Winery. It's pretty wonderful. They're really special evenings. So if you're anywhere nearby and the weather forecast is good, I'd encourage you to come. And you know, if the weather forecast is bad, we have a pretty big atrium. So I think we're set up either way.
And it's just such a good, it sounds hokey, but I don't know how else to say it. It's a really good vibe. You
It's
come
the
in and
most,
people
like,
just,
relaxing, you know, everyone's happy and enjoying each other's company. It's so mellow, and people are actually saying to us, you know, thank you for providing this really special place to just be and hang out, you know.
no pressure. It's totally informal. If you want to go through the museum, it's still kind of quiet. You can do it at your own pace. But otherwise, you can just sit in the grass and bring a blanket, or we have some blankets. You can just take one of ours and bring whoever, and no pressure.
Enjoy.
It's just a really nice
And the
night.
tattoo exhibition is up through October 13th, so you can see that if you come for garden night.
And we've got great programs for Floating Beauty coming up too.
Yeah,
You
all
can
excited.
look for calligraphy workshops, printmaking workshops, Japanese floral arrangement. So many great things coming up. So keep an eye on our website and Facebook, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us. So my cat's now behaving herself over in the windowsill after making a little cameo appearance earlier. Sorry I couldn't get the Facebook stream worked out in the beginning, and of course I figured it out halfway through. We appreciate those of you who are on with us tonight, and have a wonderful rest of your evening, everybody. Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.